Huh?
Okay, let me do the countdown here, folks.
And this office and then it's already filled up.
Hi, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And with me tonight is Matt Waldie, who has become very recently very, very well informed when it comes to international relations. And of course, a close friend of mine for a long time. And we're being joined by Dee Piers, who is the co-host of Around the World with Brandy and Dee, and also my very good friend.
Yes.
And then there is Greg Mallard, who is also a very good friend over a long period of time. I'm very glad he was able to join us here tonight because he's been absent for some time.
Yeah, I've been having some issues with my computer. I got the fan ordered and I've got it all taken apart. So once the fan gets in, I'm gonna go ahead and replace it, and then I'm going back to my shows. It's going to be changing the format from an evening show to a morning show. Is what I'm going to redo. It's going to be a morning format. So when I get back on the air, it's going to be in the morning. So bring your coffee, bring your tea in the morning, and join us for friends and all that. And it's going to be totally new and what I want to do.
Okay, sounds great. We'll look forward to it. And we see Lauderdale is here and a few other people who have yet to declare themselves. Our topic for tonight, of course, is changes following a likely Russian victory in Ukraine, Part 5. So it seems to me, since we're seeing the developing military situation there sort of coming to a climax, that we ought to talk a little bit about that before we move on to the more general topic of what may happen after a likely Russian victory. Okay, so Matt, would you like to begin?
Sure. I actually asked, sorry about that, Joe. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Am I good? Okay, cool. I asked ChatGPT what would be a possible peace plan that could come out of the Ukraine. You have to change the names from Ukraine, Russia, and to country 1, country 2, country 3, or those kind of thing, or national organization, because otherwise it'll just say, can't return that, because they don't like to return those things. But if you do, they give you a full list of the legal things, international legal steps that you would need to come up with a treaty.
Oh, that's very interesting.
It isn't short. This was a very, even to this AI unit, it was very difficult. It said it was very hard, very complicated scenarios going on. And I think one thing that it kind of revealed was maybe a background of why U.S. Through NATO was even doing this, because on paper, you're talking about a country that could max out less than 1 million troops against a country that could max out in less than 15 million troops, maybe 10, if they really fully invested and mobilized, right? So there's no way even
Just
at
as
all for them to win.
note, in World War II,
Oh God, 25 million. Yeah.
we had a population here in the United States of 150 million people, roughly the same as what Russia has now.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we were fully mobilized at that time. Everything was devoted to the war effort.
Mm-hmm.
And we had about 15 million people, okay, in the military at that time. Okay, so I presume that Russia can do pretty much the same thing if it needs to or wants to right now. Okay, and so far, they have less than a million troops,
I agree.
In Ukraine. So they're still fighting with two hands tied behind their back, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a reason. Go ahead. Sorry.
Over the weekend, the area of Bakhmut fell to the Russians under the Wagner group.
Yes.
The Wagner group went in and conquered that area. And that was, and the news on that was broke by Jimmy Dore.
Yeah, I know.
Jimmy Dore broke that down and all that. And I even saw where Tulsi Gabbard on Twitter the other day said there is no mathematical way that Ukraine can have a winnable outcome at this point. That right now is the time to end the war, to call for a ceasefire. They could do that tomorrow, and that's what the Chinese peace plan is about, is calling for a ceasefire between the Ukrainian forces, the Russian forces, and talk peace and diplomacy there, which is what needs to happen to prevent World War III. And I think the same thing needs to happen between China and Hong Kong and China and Taiwan. They need a peace plan, and they need a peace agreement as well.
Yep. Remember that Taiwan's actually just a part of China, just like Hong Kong was just a part of China.
Yeah.
Right.
But they need a peace plan.
Hong Kong's already transferred, but Taiwan needs to kick the United States out. Is what it needs to do, because that's the only reason why there's any anger between the two.
Note here that in Taiwan there's a political transition that's going on right now. The Kuomintang party is beginning to gain control, and they favor a reunification, with China. So if they gain full control, then most likely that situation is going to solve itself. I don't know how many months it might take.
Just sucks up
5, 6, but
it's the propaganda here that all we hear is that some Taiwan wants to be separate and be their own country, or just is their own country and wants to be left alone. All these kind of things, they're just either gaslighting or out and out lies to maintain this notion that Taiwan is somehow going to be a separatist or a separate country, because it's legally by our own Secretary of State part of China.
But and also according to all the agreements that we've signed.
Yep.
And
since the 70s. Yep.
Official policy of the State Department. Taiwan is part of China. We haven't explicitly given up the one China policy yet.
No.
But back to the topic that we were at with Ukraine. There is still a little bit of fighting in the Bakhmut area, but for the majority of it, they have already conquered the majority of the Bakhmut area, and there is no plausible victory for Ukraine. the best thing that Ukraine can do right now is to accept the Chinese peace plan. And that's what needs to really happen to end the war and the conflict and prevent a possible nuclear outcome of the war.
Yes.
And I have been saying this for months now.
There was a trip taken by Zelensky today. He went to Poland, to talk to the Poles. So no one knows exactly what he was talking to the Poles about. But it's interesting that he took that trip. It makes you wonder if there's some kind of deal afoot for the Poles to come in. To me, that looks like it would be a very foolish move, on the part of the Poles.
And I also saw here recently in Austria where the majority of their parliament, their governing body, when Zelensky come to Austria, they walked out on Zelensky.
Oh, I didn't hear that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, they walked out on Zelensky. There was like a whole walkout. Like the majority of the governing body, the legislature, walked out and all that because they did not want to hear him. And I wish more leaders around the world would do the same.
Yeah, me too. But there's still talk of the counteroffensive. And
I don't think that's even going to work.
I don't think it's going to work either. But there are significant, let's say, call them groupings of troops. First of all, in the Bakhmut area. Have you heard about that?
Heard about what?
There are supposedly anywhere from 50 to 80,000 troops that are in the Bakhmut area. And
a lot of them have been retreating.
And there has been a gathering of troops, also a significant gathering, in the Kherson region, as well. I haven't heard estimates as to how many troops are gathering there. But the speculation that I've heard from Alex Christoforou.
I don't know if you're on Rumble at all, but there's also a lot of, like, even RT has people on the ground showing things that the Western media is not showing.
Yeah.
And they're publicizing it on Rumble.
Excuse me. Yolanda posted here. Would someone put the map up on the screen for a minute so we can see what Greg is referring to?
Yeah,
Right.
and Lana Wagner is the name of a army group, a mercenary army group from Russia that's committing most of its troops to the Bakhmut area. Yeah, they're trying to take over get the Bakhmut area, which is in the Donbass region.
So here's the link to the map, folks.
I cannot, since I'm on my phone, I cannot share a screen. But I think Matt can, since he's on a computer.
Oh, I'm on my.
I
can try.
I can certainly share the screen, but
okay.
I thought that D has a link to the map. If you'll share that link, I can put the map up on the screen.
I was just reading what Lana said.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's Wagner and it is because of the the orchestra. They call them the orchestra. That's the other nickname for Wagner group. I've been following up on all this as well.
Hi.
Like, I knew that over the weekend that it would, like, they've been battling on in the Bakhmut area for a few weeks now, trying to take it over. And talking about this as well, Vladimir Putin took a trip himself into Mariupol.
Hmm.
Yes, I think he took a trip to Kherson also.
Yeah, he did.
He
They,
did, and they also found that in that area, in the Kherson area and in Mariupol, in schools where the children are being taught Nazi stuff. Like there's all
Yes,
sorts of evidence and all that.
for 8 years they've been doing that. Yes, that is true.
okay, so to come to a point here, sort of consolidating all this. Okay, it looks like a decision is about to be made as to whether really to have that counterattack or not. And it's
I
obvious.
don't think a counterattack is going to do any good.
It's obvious to me that the Russians have been lying in wait before the counterattack, are waiting to commit their reserve troops to any possible counterattack. And so, if it's true that the Ukrainians will make that counterattack in the next 2-3 weeks, we're probably looking at the climax of the war, because I believe this is the last.
This is the fourth army. This is the fourth army they've built. This is the last one they can build. So there's 3 prongs to this spring offensive. One is to release Bakhmut. One is to go through Zaporizhzhia to try to get to Mariupol now, because they think that's the best path to block the Crimea Bridge, and the one in the north coming from Kharkiv out to push back towards Russia to take back the northern part of Lugansk. So I don't.
Have you got any information on the number of troops they have in each of the 3 prongs?
Yeah, the prong going south in Dnipropetrovsk, so it's going south towards Zaporizhzhia, is about they estimated was about 40,000 strong. Now they're thinking it's more like 60. That the area around Bakhmut has, like you said, could have up, and that whole line, because I mean, it has about 80,000 troops, and it's kind of a understanding, because it's not necessary that all those troops are there for Bakhmut. They're along the last line between the rest of the Donbass. Really, there's only one defense line left for Ukraine, and they have to keep those troops there. And then the ones in the north is the mystery. That's 20,000 is all I heard, and all that's been reported.
If they have 20,000,
but they have a ton of equipment up there that is not everywhere else in the battlefield. That's coming clear, that they're starting that looks to be where the Russian army and Ukraine's best that they've got are actually going to hook up. That's just from one person's point of view.
Interesting, but if I look at the totals of what you put forward, we're looking at about 160,000 troops, which the Ukrainians are about to commit or have already committed to battle. Okay, at this point. And
I've also heard where Zelensky's been wanting NATO troops to come in as well.
The U.S.
but
would like
they are
that as well.
a non-NATO member, which NATO cannot commit to troops coming into Ukraine.
Yep. Yeah, and the U.S. would love to have an excuse to go in there through NATO, and that's one of the interesting things I wanted to bring up with the treaty stuff that I was doing. I honestly think that they thought, because part of the 3, I think it's NATO, not the U.S., that's the belligerent in this second party, that a third party or another power would be the intercedent and would be actually the one that would be in control of the treaty. What would actually happen? I think that knowing that Ukraine was going to fall, that the U.S. using them through NATO could make a case at the UN that they own to be that third party that would create the treaty that, of course, would knock Russia off of its tilt because it wouldn't allow them to recover economically by taking over the territories they have, and it would also keep that's the only thing I can think of that, and it's true that, but I don't think they can't do it now because there's too much evidence that the U.S. Funded and supplied weapons. So the only country that I can see, because the UN is 84% of the time does whatever the U.S. tells it to do. So it's a U.S. Run, led, and dictated body. And most of the treaties show that it really can't be the UN anyway. They can be the ratifier, but they can't be the overseer of it. So they have to pick a country or a couple of countries that would run that. The only two I can think of would be India and China. So because China, Russia,
Brazil.
Yeah, the problem with Brazil is that they don't have as much of they're not as well thought of in the world internationally in these kind of things. India being very allied towards the United States, and China being very allied towards the Russia, that would allow for both of them to supposedly be neutral. But I agree with you that, and I don't know if Brazil would help. They might, but I think that Lula is pretty much set on becoming, removing them and going, because they are one of the BRICS countries. I think he's just being kind of nice to them right now until he jumps ship completely over to China, as we're seeing a lot of countries do. But that was the only thing I could think of that they really thought that they would be able to dictate the aftermath of this whole thing, to be able to control the economics of Ukraine.
As usual, they dream.
Yeah, I could actually see that being a plausible outcome between India and China being the peacemakers in this, which would be a good thing because, like you said, they are internationally known more so than Brazil. And that would determine the end of the Ukraine conflict, and they can draw up a peace deal with Russia, with the Ukrainian leadership and all that, which that would be the more plausible outcome of the war coming to an end.
Yeah, it's in the DMZ zone somewhere that would give them a buffer zone, but that they would have to be, both sides, they'd have to be relatively demilitarized. And I think that's what we're really determining right now, is how badly Russia wins, because I still believe that even if Russia, does get all the way up to the Dnieper River, which I think is what they really want, I still think that they're going to go through a process to come up with a treaty and to try and create a permanent or a more lasting peace in that region, because I think China is going to demand it. I think that's part of the deal.
India.
India.
Do you think that the areas that Russia has already taken over are going to remain, as Russia? And
I think the offensives may take some back for a little while if they actually run it, even though the U.S. has told them not to at this point and come out with dire warnings that it's going to be horrible. That was just this morning. So that I think that they're still going to take land back, because I think that's kind of Russia's whole modus, when they run these things, is they kind of let you say, oh, you want this? I'm sorry, I'll back off and retreat. And then you guys come into this totally flat land and, we're going to wipe your army out and move on. That's what they seem to be doing the last year in Ukraine. Yes, I don't see that changing. So it matters on where they say we're done.
When they begin to negotiate, though, okay, I don't think there's going to be a possibility of them giving back any of the places that they have taken over thus far.
We have to remember aid, right? Who's actually in the better position to rebuild these countries? I even think from a neutral standpoint, I don't think that they're going to want to be anywhere but with Russia.
Right, I believe that also, but I also think that those areas they've taken over so far are predominantly Russian from a cultural point of view. And I think the Russians want those people inside of Russia, and that Putin is probably not in a position to give up any of those areas because there would be too much opposition inside of Russia if he did. And also, they've sacrificed a lot to get those areas. So I believe by Zaporozhye,
mm-hmm.
okay, and also Donetsk, the Donetsk, okay, and Lugansk area,
Mm-hmm.
okay, are going to stay with Russia. Crimea, of course, is going to stay with Russia. That's not going to leave either. So I think the Ukrainians are just going to have to accept that. Okay.
I think they will accept it. I think they tried to accept it once before, and we're told not to. It's really just the United States that keeps pushing this nonsense that they somehow want to take back all their land and love the dictators. But I don't really think that's popular among Ukrainians as much as they want it to be.
Okay. But in April of 2000, okay, in 22, the Zaporozhye area had not been taken over by Russia yet. So the Ukrainians could have gotten a peace agreement where Zaporozhye would have stayed, okay, in Ukraine. Okay. But now
Mariupol would still be theirs.
Yeah, Mariupol would still be theirs also. And now they don't have that possibility anymore.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about what's been going on in the rest of the world and how a defeat of Ukraine, let's say in the next 2 months, is likely to affect what's been happening on the economic front and what's been happening on the de-dollarization front? Do we have any opinions on that?
Yeah. I actually think de-dollarization at this point, even though the Ukraine war distracted Russia and distracted the United States into thinking that this was an important proxy war, the deals behind the scene with China and Russia have definitely determined more of de-dollarization than the actual fight in Ukraine. I honestly think that looking back on it with 2020 hindsight, the war in Ukraine allowed China to ascend and create BRICS because it distracted the United States leadership from acting towards the actual ascension of the multipolar world. Whether that was a plan or not, I don't know, but that is effectively what happened. It's unstoppable at this point because not only because of how much more goodwill there is towards China in the world or trust in their leadership, but the mistakes that the U.S. continue to make. They just are compounding problems with monetarism, which is what we talk about all the time. That I mean, there's whether we have a bank failure or whether we know the EU has already failed, and we know that leaves them open for China to come in and So I just think that at one point or another, we're going to have to throw up our hands and go, well, how can we get along in this world? And I think we need to do it before Mexico finally says, well, we're going to take over this hemisphere too. Because Mexico and South America can do that.
Yes.
And if there, I was watching something last night, and I watch a show in the Philippines that's on ABS-CBN, and there was an economist on that said within the next 5 years the U.S. will most likely permanently lose its dollar reserve currency status in the world.
Okay,
And
we
it's
talked
coming.
about that a little in the last installment of this. One thing we were talking about is something like 85 to 90% of the transactions in the world at this time are done in dollars. And one thing we talked about was how over the next 10 years or so, that may be reduced to 40%.
Yep.
Does anybody think the de-dollarization process is moving faster than that, so that it might be down to 40% over the next 5 years?
I think it's going to happen much faster than 10 years. I think it's going to be more or less in 5 years, according to what this Filipino economist said on Market Edge last night. He said that the next reserve currency will most likely be the Chinese yuan or something, that the world reserve currency is going to move to another global currency over the next 5 to 10 years.
That's a monetarist view for sure. That we need to have a hegemon, monetary supplier. The movement now is actually even more scary to this person. I understand where they're coming from, but everybody will be able to produce what the money that they need in order to trade with. So there won't be one money that they have to have all the time in order to trade with the world, which means that we automatically turn into a gigantic resource-based economy. And that's what that turns it into. All those, so that 5 years is, you're probably right. Greg, you're probably right. I just don't think that China will allow it. They're going to throttle it, so that, because they do not want 300 million people in the United States they don't even want us to go hungry. They don't have any desire to see us in pain. They don't believe that is good business. Sorry, go ahead.
And I was also watching another program, and the Chinese leadership did say he does not view the people of the U.S. as the enemy, just like Vladimir Putin said the same sentiment as Xi Jinping. They don't view us, the everyday, ordinary U.S. citizen, as the enemy. It's just that the government is so backwards in their thinking that, and they actually said something. I was watching something the other day, and Putin said something that I wholeheartedly agree with. We do, as Americans, need to fight for a better way of life, like a living wage standard, Medicare for all, the Green New Deal. Even he is wanting to bring forth some climate proposals. Putin and Xi Jinping themselves, and this is what I've been thinking all along. We need a climate warrior elected to the White House that is willing to go to Putin, go to Xi Jinping, all three of them, even meet with the Prime Minister of India and all of these major countries and talk about major climate proposals and propose a global Green New Deal. And that's what I want. And the global Green New Deal would bring about a true peace in the world. because we would not have this militarization. We can be using the military to go into other countries and help install solar panels, wind farms, geothermal energy. What else? Tidal wave energy, like any, and we can move away.
Well, that's what China's doing.
That's what
That's
China's doing.
exactly what China's doing. You're right.
They're moving away
And that's
from.
what they're sending their engineers around the world.
But let's go back for a minute to the reserve currency issue.
Yep.
Okay, for a moment. Okay, first of all, if we have a situation in 5 years where the percent of dollar transactions of the whole world has fallen to 40%, 40% is still a gigantic amount. It may not be the single reserve currency for the whole world, but it would still be the reserve currency for a very large percentage of the world. Okay, in other words, it's not a situation where the dollar is going to be gone overnight or even in 5 years or something like that. There was another point, okay, I wanted to make. Okay, I think it was yesterday, that the Chinese and the Russians and some of the other members, okay, of BRICS, including Brazil, have decided to develop a common currency.
Yep.
Now, that raised all sorts of alarm bells for me, not from the standpoint of, the United States and what's going to happen to the dollar and stuff like that, but from the standpoint of the BRICS nations themselves. If they develop a common currency, the first thing that comes to my mind is, who's going to issue the common currency?
Yeah, that's one thing that I've been wondering from an MMT standpoint as to who's going to be the sole currency issuer of the new currency and all that.
Well, the question is there going to be a sole currency issuer? Also,
Not the way we know it. Not the way we're understanding or explaining it right now. That we're explaining it as a monetarily sovereign country would explain their production of currency. This would actually look more like a bank, like a Fed Reserve. So this would be like a World Fed Reserve, where the actual countries would put in their own money, whatever they make, whatever they produce, and then the equivalent of that would be used to, and it's pretty much just like we use ours as a measurement of volume and transactions across the system, so that a country that hasn't necessarily so there's no need for an IMF is what I'm getting at. There's no need for a private functioning bank to go out to tell countries they need to borrow from them. They would be borrowing it from.
I was seemed to be suggesting that each country would keep their own domestic currency for domestic purposes, but there would be this other currency, the international currency, that would be used for trading. So then, of course, the question arose immediately in my mind, who's going to issue the international currency? Is it going to be under control of one country? Is it going to be under control of 6 countries? Or is it going to be under control of nobody?
Yep, BRICS, BRICS. That's right now what they said. Those BRICS countries control it.
Okay, but how many countries are going to be in BRICS? We have countries joining now.
Not BRICS Plus. BRICS Plus is separate. BRICS itself is just Brazil,
Just
Russia.
5 original BRICS countries.
Yep.
Would be in control of the international currency.
Unless something is foreseen. They even talked about that because they haven't ratified that yet. That's what's coming up. I'm pretty sure I think it's China that they're having the convention this year. But that is one of the topics they want to discuss.
Okay, but if they develop an international currency controlled by those five nations, then the institution they create to issue that currency would be in control of the quantity of currency used in international trade by the BRICS.
I don't know if that's avoidable.
Well, if that's the way things are going to work, then
I'm
that
not
currency is going to be sort of similar to gold.
Well,
It's going
yes,
to be currency limited, okay, in quantity, okay, and it's going to be something like the ECB, but for the BRICS nations. And
yeah, I don't think that's how they're looking at it. And I need to do a little more research because from what I understood, they were supposed to have some kind of algorithm or some other type of calculation that was, that was not that the countries all agreed upon was fair and would be looked at and researched as countries joined. But I don't know if that's gonna work.
Lana Dale asks a question. The fifth one in BRICS would be South Africa.
Yep.
yes, it's the
To
union.
answer Lana's question in the chat.
Yes, that's right. They're the S.
Yes.
in
I
BRICS.
don't think we can answer that what it's actually going to be because I don't think they've really made the final. But that's what I've heard is that it's much more of a direct, just clearinghouse. It isn't what I would think of as like they printing out digital and putting it into accounts.
Okay.
Well, they could trade in like cryptocurrency or something like that, that could be the reserve currency for those nations. Could be like a cryptocurrency in that aspect.
Could be,
Like they
but
can.
Okay. I'm trying to understand how that would work from the MMT point of view and whether there would be any similarities to the euro, which of course has been a failure for Europe because it's limited and it constrains development, okay, in each country. Of course, that is different because the euro is used for domestic purposes, okay, in all of the European nations, not just for trading. Okay, whereas what BRICS is working with is an idea that the international currency would be used only for trading.
Yeah, and I think, and this may be wrong, but the finance minister of China talked about the need to lower something to do with gold and gold acquisition and holdings. That was they were trying to get rid of, or they're trying to make moot and turn it, because of the commodification of precious metals was a what is it called? Destabilizing. It has been a historical destabilizing problem for the world.
So
Oil included.
they recognize that has been a destabilizing factor, so they're not likely to go along with that sort of idea.
No, and
be gold,
that's what I'm getting.
Be raw materials or anything like that. It is going to be a fiat currency of some sort.
I think that's what they're talking about because, and so the brief thing that I heard was that so that whatever country was attached to this group, there would be their bank account full of dollars, and those dollars equivalents would be matched out into a separate shadow account, double entry accounting of that equals the amount in BRICS dollars, in that it would be a purely digital system. There would be no metal of any kind.
Okay, so how would the value of that currency be driven?
Trade deals.
Right, but
Foreign direct investment.
Okay, but folks,
maybe
know that the value of fiat currencies is driven
based on the
taxation.
taxes that return.
I would like to get bottle caboose point of view on this as well.
Okay, I think they're not talking about taxation.
Mm-mm.
So the question I'm raising is,
Maybe trade tax.
we're going to drive the value of the currency. Maybe trade taxes, yeah.
For maybe fees, maybe trade fees, transaction fees. There may be. I'm just trying to. I think there might be some reserve requirements that actually can create the same drive as taxes. So they have to keep a certain amount in their BRICS account in order to be active at this level or that level.
But the overall point, okay, I was really making is,
Yeah, I
they've
agree.
got some unsolved technical problems
Mm-hmm.
how this international currency is going to work.
It's an interesting thought game, though.
If it takes,
Like, I've been wondering this for weeks, where, like, from the MMT standpoint, as to what the goal is as well. Like, that's just been the top thing at the top of my mind, is how would this work from a MMT standpoint and all that. And it's just been something I've been very curious about.
me too.
Yeah, we don't know yet. As far as how the description might be altered to what we have currently, but it will because it's not going to be true monetary sovereignty. So it'll somehow the system will be described in a different way. So I mean, and that may be the exciting time right now, is that because there are alternatives to how we drive our system. That's just MMT just describes what's going on, and so it would describe this differently. That's the only thing, maybe, or maybe it won't. But in our own understanding of how money works right now, there's like Joe was talking about, we need some kind of driver, some coercion to use the BRICS. For a little while would be to get back at the United States, which is what's happening right now, right? Where they're seeing opportunities to tell the United States to fuck off, and that's awesome. That drives the use of the BRIC system, and probably will drive the use all the way to the point that it creates some kind of currency. But if they don't figure out how to keep that coercion, light going, and it's the whole difference between our philosophy, MMT's description, and monetarism's description, where they view things as a free market driver. Everything is driven by the prices and private profit, and everything driven to a price. So it's and we know that system isn't accurate. It doesn't actually describe what's going on.
Yes.
But in MMT, that describes what's going on. But is that describing it only because this is what we've set up right now? Maybe something else can be set up that can be described differently.
But that raises another very important point. When Randy Ray talks about the reserve currency and how it's not really that important to have the reserve currency, he reasons that when transactions have to be made, in the reserve currency, and you don't hold the reserve currency, it's still okay, because you can always go into the international market and you can trade for the reserve currency to do your transactions, because the reserve currency involved is very plentiful, in the system. So you can always buy the reserve currency and make your trade. That's been the case with the dollar for a very long time, generally speaking, but the United States has been screwing with that through the economic sanctions. So the question I'm raising is, will the BRICS nations start to screw with that also, from their point of view, by denying their currency the two nations that are not a part of their system, so they won't be able to buy the BRICS currency in a so-called free market?
And you're not describing what the neoliberals and neocons in the United States are pushing so hard to be so aggressive, because they are completely fearful of that state. They're being blocked out of the world economy. That's how they feel. I'm not saying I'm just saying that's how they feel.
Yes. Okay, I understand. But the basic point there is they're the ones who've been blocking everybody else out of the world economy.
Well, yeah, it's what happens when you lose.
Right. So they've set up a situation where people have no longer wanted to use the dollar because the United States has been using it as a biased instrument to coerce other countries with.
Yeah. Yeah, and now they don't have that control anymore. They tried, but they played their hand once too often, and China said, "Well, I'm done with this." And let's be honest, if China did what they did, if we did, China did to us what we're doing to Russia right now, the United States would be devastated. Absolutely, every one of us would have some kind of shortage, some kind of problem, there would be massive infrastructure issues in the United States. Not just that you can't go to 99-cent city anymore. There are literally every part and everything that we run comes at one point or another through China.
Yes.
Whether they built it there or they traded it from there, or that is the economic power that China has, and they could devastate us at any point without ever firing a weapon. Yet, like you said, Greg, they do not want to punish us, the people. That's all sanctions are.
And that's why the Chinese government is showing to be the bigger and better person than what the media, what the government gives them credit for. Like they say they don't want people to suffer no more than the four of us and everybody in this chat. We don't want people to suffer.
Yep.
And what the Chinese and the Russians are doing, they don't want people to suffer. Like if you really want to know the truth, all of these sanctions that we have imposed on Russia in the last year or more have actually come back to backfire. There's been a backfire effect. Like it has driven, we have seen shortages in our stores. Yes, we have. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. We have seen shortages in the supply chain. We have also seen inflation as a result. We've seen banks collapse as a result. Maybe that should be what signals the government to act on a peace deal to keep what little we have footing in the world we have afloat before it's too late.
Okay, there's something we have to say about the Chinese approach to that also. It seems like the Chinese approach to the international system is pretty much expressed through the Belt and Road Initiative. And what the Chinese is saying to the rest of the world is, look, let's implement the Belt and Road Initiative. It's good for us, but it's also good for everybody. Everybody is going to benefit from this. Now, I'm not here to say that's right or wrong, but I am here to say that's a good way of approaching the world with your foreign policy. Okay, in other words, what you want to do with foreign policy is to have a policy that says to the rest of the world, if you join with us in this policy, it's not only going to benefit us, but it's going to benefit everybody in the world. And
just like I was saying earlier, the global Green New Deal, which in 2020 and 2019, which is exactly what Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn wanted. And I read in the manifesto that Jeremy Corbyn had when he was running for prime minister in 2019. In his manifesto, it said the global Green New Deal would bring about true peace and stability in the world because we're moving away from fossil fuels. we're moving more toward an economy that is centered around green energy and green resources. Like right now, we can have a farm subsidy bill to subsidize farmers here in the U.S. The Canadian government can do the same. And we can begin growing industrial scale hemp across America, where we could take the hemp and turn that into fuel. We could take the fiber and make other things out of it. Maybe we could trade with China on building materials made from hemp for building materials in China, which are made of bamboo. And that kind of economy would bring about peace. And that's what the global Green New Deal would truly do. Because not only are we as a world committed to tackling the climate crisis at hand, which is at our front door right now. If you want to see a prime example of that, look in the Midwest right now.
Yes, I am.
On the 31st, 65 tornado warnings issued across the Midwest and in the Southeast United States.
Amazing. Incredible.
Yeah.
So perhaps the central point here is that the Chinese are coming forward with a foreign policy vision that includes everybody.
Even us.
It's comprehensive, okay, and inclusive.
But there's a problem. The United States is probably not going to be involved in the planning of it in its initial inception. They are probably not going to have overall control of it. I'm saying that just because I like the idea of a Green New Deal up around the world. I don't think we're going to be able to have that kind of control over it. We're going to have to be participants and not leaders in this sector at the beginning.
Yes, and I agree too. But what I'm saying is that if we look at this from the standpoint of competition with the Chinese, which tends to be the perspective that America always takes, we're in a competition with the Chinese.
Yeah, that's got to die.
If we say we're in a competition with the Chinese, the way we're competing is a very lousy way to compete, because we're competing, like a bully.
Yep.
If we really want to compete, what we need to do is to create a vision of foreign policy that includes everybody in the world, including the Chinese. And
that's where the global Green New Deal comes in.
That might be where the global Green New Deal comes in, but as I've seen the enunciation of the global Green New Deal, it hasn't been specified in a very concrete way with reference to international trade. What the Chinese are doing with their vision is they're saying, well, here's the Belt and Road Initiative. It's going to integrate us all through trade. It's going to be good for everyone through trade if we all collaborate in implementing the Belt and Road Initiative. And that's
there's a Green New Deal in there, though. It's just called the Shanghai Cooperative. It's not called the Green New Deal. That's where the SCO, which is the funding part, the backing the Belt Road Initiative, is lending out money to deal with infrastructure, and it's demanding that infrastructure be green at a certain level, and then that is part of their actual return on that investment. So the bank actually accepts lower interest rates or higher interest rates, depending on how green their development is, where they get their usage, how they use their people. So there's controls involved. So the Belt and Road is the communication and the transportation and the trade, and the SCO is that you got to do it in thinking of the next 30 or 40 years. You have to do it that it brings down this carbon footprint, which means you're going to have to plant of just that. I mean, that's one of the biggest initiatives at SCO is to deal with these countries that they have to plant trees everywhere, and because we have a natural carbon.
Okay, so if
gravity.
we have a choice, okay, which is to approach this through saying, okay, we like your ideas, we love your ideas, it's a great vision, we want to join up. That's a possible approach to this. Okay, the other approach is to say, okay, we see certain flaws, okay, with your approach. So here's a different approach, but what it shares with your approach is that it's inclusive, it's good for everybody, and there's no bullying component to it. We're not going to bully anybody. It's an attractive vision for the world.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to collaborate with us. So I think those are our main choices for foreign policy for the future. Of course, we have to abandon the foreign policy approach we're taking now because that just doesn't
It's not working.
incentives to people. Yeah,
killing the planet.
Yeah, it's killing the planet, and it delivers debt to other countries that are developing. Only debt that we insist on repayment of.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's insane.
And we only do that because we demand that everything makes a profit.
Yes.
Let's shift.
And
Let's shift to the global south for a moment.
Yep, we can.
In the Philippines, and this is a really good, bold idea that I really like what they're doing down in the Philippines. In order for high school graduates to graduate high school, they have to plant a certain amount of native species trees around their city in an urban forestry setting. And it also creates more urban green space. Mm-hmm. And that right there could easily curb the deforestation going on, which would even continue to go on even with the use of electric vehicles, which they are not talking about. With electric vehicles, you're still going to be stripping vast sections of land, but you're going to be continuing to commit to global deforestation, which is the truth. You're still going to be strip mining land, and all of that equipment used is going to emit carbon, and you're going to be releasing that carbon in the lithium mines into the atmosphere. We need to go to hemp fuels, not electric vehicles, because hemp fuels still will emit no carbon. But I was reading something the other day which was extremely interesting, and this was from a fire department where a Tesla semi-truck caught on fire.
Wow. The
normal semi-truck, mind you, like a Freightliner Kenworth Peterbilt, it would take between 500 and 600 gallons of water to put that truck out. With the Tesla semi-truck, it took 12,000 to 15,000 gallons of water. You're using more water, which takes up from the earth.
Yep.
And that lithium is getting on the ground, and it is polluting that ground around there, and it's making it virtually radioactive. Because lithium, I think, is a radioactive metal.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's radioactive metal or not.
No, I'm not very good at chemistry.
You're still committing to pollution from the fires caused by it, and you're also still having the batteries leaking acid onto the ground, and it gets God knows where.
Yeah, well, we certainly need something else.
Hemp.
Stuff.
Hemp.
Outside of lithium, because lithium has been a major factor in the continued operation of imperialism.
Yeah, and while China is still trying to compete with the United States because of the United States' insistence on competing, they are not going to be interested until they are completely, established, and have the United States not as an economic or a physical threat to them anymore before they really lower their pollution. Because they have a large automobile industry.
Yes, they do.
They sell a ton to Russia and around the world. And they have a computer to Tesla that is as good as anything that Tesla produces, but the lithium that they get does ruin the world. So their solution is to push more public transportation, to push autonomous freight hauling, and electric trains, and atomic power.
Yeah, they've got very good solutions.
Nuclear power. Yeah. So that's how they're trying to adjust.
The reason why I support hemp is because it would benefit rural communities across the U.S. in a way that has never been benefited. And you have to understand, I'm from a rural background. I'm from a rural community in South Georgia. So I'm looking at it from a rural standpoint on what would help workers in our rural communities.
You know that the United States was built on hemp. That was really our second largest crop from the beginning. And we made more rope than we were the world center for a trade for rope for a long time, and all hemp products. So I would almost be going back to our at least our farming roots. Quite honest.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We've been at this now for about an hour and 6 minutes, and I think we should probably postpone this further discussion, which has been great and fascinating, until next Tuesday. But before we leave, let's start looking at the comments, that we've had, and see if we have any questions that we can answer.
I'm standing outside my house right now. As you can tell, if you can hear the critters chirping.
Okay.
But it's been good joining Matt for a change.
Yeah, it's good seeing you, Greg. I haven't talked to you in a while.
Okay, so let's. So Lana asks, Wagner of the U.S. or Wagner, of Germany? The Wagner Group is
Wagner.
Well, I think it's the right way to pronounce it. Is Wagner, but anyway, the Wagner Group is a private company in Russia. Okay, it is made up of Russians, and they have recruited a lot of older military people and prisoners, but convicts to serve, in their army, and they have been integrated into the Russian military, not distributed, but integrated. So they take orders from the Russian general staff. And they're fully Russian, in that sense, but they have been the major attack troops, the Russians have used, in the Ukraine campaign.
3 cities so far.
They're very good at storming places and taking over places. They're extremely brave people, and they've been very effective for those who haven't been following the war very much. And Robert Copeland says, I hear they're still fighting, in Bakhmut. Yes, they are still fighting. It's estimated, today by the Duran people, that about 85% control of Bakhmut, now lies with the Russians, the Wagner Group. But there are still people fighting there on the Ukraine side. So the fighting isn't finished there, even though the place has fallen to the Russians. Specifically, the administrative building has been taken over by the Russians and is now flying the Russian flag and the Wagner flag also. Sorry, we didn't have a map for you.
We'll have one next week. We'll make sure of it.
Okay, we'll make sure we have a map. Yeah, it's very easy to get one. Lana says, thanks, Matt. A Russian group with a German name. Interesting. Yeah, that was interesting. But it's not only a German name, it's also a Dutch name.
But it is the musician. It is, because that's what they call them, the orchestra, and they call the stormtroopers the musicians.
Yes. Very interesting.
Really brings his soul thing into it. Spirit.
Yes.
They're good at that.
No idea where these towns are. We'll try to get the map separately. The towns are in the eastern part, okay, of Ukraine, okay, in the Donbass region, and the region south, okay, of Donbass. We've been talking about all the activities that have been going on in the eastern part, okay, of Ukraine. If you go to Brian Berletic's channel, okay, he uses maps very frequently. Each day he talks about the battle, okay, in Ukraine, and he usually shows a map which is actually favorable to the Ukrainians, so he won't be accused of using a map that is biased towards the Russians.
Yeah, he don't want to be accused of being a Russian bot.
Right, right.
Like I've been accused of being a lot lately.
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you have. I think anybody who's telling the truth about the situation.
Yeah, I think I finally had enough of it like 2-3 months ago and started posting anti-Ukraine stuff, and so far I've been called a Russian bot. I've been accused of being a Republican. I've been accused of being a Trump supporter, QAnon, a Q nut, or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, any straw man they can get you.
And it did not work. I kept firing back.
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
Good
Keep
job.
firing back. Yeah, that is a very good job. Robert Copeland says, I think the counterattack will happen when the ground dries up and the Ukrainian troops finish training.
There's any left. That's a long way away. They're going to keep dumping people in the Bakhmut.
Yeah. But I think the ground is drying up now. It's very close to.
This week's better. Yeah, this week's better. It snowed like a foot last week, but yeah, they say it's supposed to be dried up. Their tanks can't, and light armored vehicles can't get by the mud at all. So, and I think the Russians planned that really well, where they just stopped working on the periphery and the farmland and just put all Russian. Now the military around it is all Russian, while Wagners are only in the city center. So they were able to concentrate their power right there. They really well led, despite what propaganda likes to say. They are extremely well led.
So Robert Copeland says, what's the story about Finland planning to join NATO? It's not a plan, okay? It's a reality. They're now officially part of NATO.
And it's not a big deal. You're talking very, very small amount of people in both of those countries, very, very small amount of troops. Russia even said before any of this happened that they didn't care if Finland or Sweden joined NATO. That's not the issue. When you have the second largest standing army in Europe, which was in Ukraine, with that long of a border in such a close proximity to their capital, all of a sudden
that was the issue.
That changes.
There were 44 million people there, okay, in Ukraine. By
much larger population.
I think in Finland we're talking 6 million people or 7 million people, and in Sweden we're talking about 11 million people.
That's small potatoes compared to Ukraine.
Yes.
Less than 100,000 troops in each one.
Right, and of course there are very few people in the Baltic countries also. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia.
and almost zero military industrial
Steve Wolpran says, Robert, I
produced.
believe it's already happened. Yes, it has already happened, Steve. You're quite
Yeah,
right.
they officially joined NATO today.
Yep.
And I have been studying up on all of this. Like, I've got a friend of mine that's very informative of what's going on in the conflict, and he and I have been exchanging a lot of stuff that we see and all that. And he posts very good videos from a group called South Front, and they post a lot of accurate information, which is non-biased. It's independent. So southfront.org has a lot of really good videos and content on all of this.
Okay, the people I watch most closely are Alexander Christoforou, okay, and Alexander Mercouris.
Oh, and get this. Thank goodness for Elon Musk buying out Twitter, because I've even been back following RT on all of this as well, and Sputnik, and they are they're not biased at all. They're very fair in their reporting. Like, I don't see this conflict going on much longer. And all these people that are saber rattling saying, oh, Putin wants nuclear war this, Putin wants nuclear war that. I saw a video the other day where Putin says, I don't see nuclear war being a viable option in this war because it solves nothing. And he says that he does not want it to turn nuclear. He's doing everything that he can himself to keep it away from going that far.
Yes, he is. And this is even while he has the nuclear advantage. In other words,
yeah, he says he has no desire to use nuclear war.
And he has hypersonic missiles, which we do not have. So, as a nuclear power right now, Russia is stronger than the United States.
Well, they have like 50% more nuclear capabilities than we do. Like, we have maybe 4,500 nukes, and they have close to 7,000. So they're more than 50%. Yeah, they have more than 50% of what we have.
Their production capacity is far greater than ours.
Yes.
On everything, all artillery, tanks, even, military personnel. I mean, they recruit far more than because they have, in a large respect, a much easier time proving a reason that they're there to their people. They, even though there's a lot of people that call us Russian, but there's a large group and a larger group growing that may not be vocal about it, but in the United States, it just does not either pay attention to this war, doesn't believe in it, doesn't understand it, and is outright like us against it. So they just don't have the capacity to build an army like they want to in the United States.
And public opinion, like over the last, I think, 6 months, within the last 6 months in the U.S. has shifted totally away from supporting the Ukraine war to being against the Ukraine conflict. Like, public opinion, even in Europe, is shifting away from supporting it. That's why you're seeing, like in Austria, the leaders there walking out on Zelensky. And I think in the coming months, I think we're going to start seeing more and more politicians walk out on Zelensky and speaking out.
And we're going to see more and more protests. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's
concerning the war, and they're going to be big protests like what we have in France right now.
Yeah. And France is not completely about just the age retirement changes. There are plenty of anti-NATO flags out there, and some people are saying that it's closer to 40% NATO anger at this point and growing. And that group is exceedingly easy to coerce into believing that NATO is no good as well. I just how we demoralized or we belittle their protests in that country right now is not doing anybody any favor. I think they think they're protecting themselves, but just because he raised the without going through and their version of Congress to raise the retirement age, surely did piss off a lot of French people. But there was a litany, and I read a French. There were 10 things that all happened. This was the final straw that broke the camel's back. It's got nothing to do with that being the reason they're out there. They're out there because that's the 10th reason in a row in 1 month that Macron wouldn't listen to anybody and didn't give a shit about the people. That's why they're out on the street.
Exactly. A lot of
And we're not immune to those protests here either. I think we're going to start seeing that, like right now. Like, let's shift it to Tennessee. Like with the trans issue, Gen Z is staging literal walkouts of schools in protest.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to start seeing more anti-war protests over the summer. Like, I think we're going to see them grow even larger. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, as awful as she is, as much as I strongly dislike her, she is even more to the left of the squad on foreign policy.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Okay, Lana points out, Rocco posted a video that we've now started deflation, okay, and also Mike Norman posted a new video asking if we're going to turn into Greece. But yikes. I didn't see Rocco's video, but I saw Mike's video today. And I suppose my one comment on it is, if we turn into Greece, okay, it's deliberate and voluntary, okay, on our part, because
Janet Yellen's an idiot.
Okay, because we are a monetary sovereign, and we can use the coin, okay, at any time. Oh, by the way, I've heard a lot of people talking about how, okay, there was Tyler Durden, okay, at Zero Hedge, was coming out with a thread yesterday saying that the Fed is insolvent because of all the unrealized losses it has. So, of course, people are replying to this, okay, and they're saying the federal government can't go broke. Everybody is saying the federal government can't go broke, and that's right. But
yeah, that is right.
Part of that, the interesting part of that is that the Fed does not have the authority to issue capital to itself. Okay, so the point is that the Fed...
Proving our point, yep.
We feel vindicated.
Own authority can't stop any insolvency that might possibly show up. But what can happen is, okay, if, let's say, the executive branch decides to mint the 100-key coin, then the Fed can give the 100-key to the Treasury Department, and the Treasury Department gives the 100-key coin to the Fed, which then becomes an asset, okay, of the Fed, and so then there's no insolvency.
Yep.
Yeah, that ends the insolvency problem.
Yep.
Okay, but also a key point is, if you look at the dollars involved in this, the people who are saying the Fed is insolvent are saying that it's insolvent to the tune of $44.2 billion, which is really small potatoes.
Very small.
Okay. In other words, the 100-key coin would cover that just about forever.
Yeah.
So
it's $26 trillion budget, and they're worried about. That's like,
Yeah, they're worried about a $44.2 billion.
It's utterly ridiculous.
I mean, those people at Zero Hedge are crazy.
Yeah, so it isn't really true that they're getting insolvent. Even if their worldview was correct or their money view was correct, right? That's way too little to actually cause, you know, the bank loans to go under. And it's a ridiculous statement. But I understand that they have to, but even in their own description, they actually screw up and prove our description.
I still have people today that I still have people today on my news feed on Facebook who still believe that banks are the bank in their local towns are the ones that create the currency, and I'm like, no, they get their money from the treasury and the Federal Reserve in their states. That's where the money comes from.
Fractional reserve has been a amazingly bad point of view of the system. and I say that as a point of view because it is just a point of view. It is, you could prove that there's something like a fractional reserve going on, but it isn't, because that's bank notes. That's bank money. That's not the same thing as the reserves that they hold in order to give out those loans.
Right. So Lana says, Randy Ray talked about the dollar no longer being the top reserve currency. It's not as scary as people think. That, of course, is quite right. But I brought up a problem.
Randy Ray always tells it like it is, and I love it. Matt Waldie and I have sat up in the middle of the night all night before, sending each other videos and shit like that from El Randall Ray, Fadl Kaboom.
Yeah.
The MMT podcast with Christian Riley and Patty Pino.
Mm-hmm. They're very good. Yeah, I'm enjoying Ty Keen's and hosting of oh God, I just lost my train of thought. Ty Keen's is doing professor he's English, but he's in Australia now.
Stephen Hale.
No, he was on there recently, but that's not who I'm thinking of. Professor Keen.
Yeah, Steve Keen.
Yeah, and Ty is doing Professor Keen's broadcast every week, and he's been doing a really good job. He had Gabby and from Australia and those guys on just last week. They were great.
Yeah,
I'd like to have Christian Riley on live with me one night.
That was good. Yeah, Dirk Ensign this weekend. That was a really interesting conversation, since Ty and Dirk had a little run-in on Twitter. That was totally resolved, by the way. How adults, when they have misunderstandings and miscommunications, actually talk things out and go, "Oh yeah, you're right. Oh yeah, you're right." That's how things.
I would like to see happen. The people with Revolutionary Blackout Network. I would like to see them have like Derek Hamilton on.
Oh, that would be awesome. Sure. Yeah.
That would be awesome for them to have Derek Hamilton on.
Derek is extremely talented. Very, very smart person.
Okay. So Steve Day says Uncle Sam can afford to be kind. Every nation onto its own currency. Ladadell says Brazil, Russia, India, China, who is the fifth one? And then she says, aha, so South Africa. Thanks, Greg. Steve Day says, back the drachma. Yeah, I've been wanting to do that for a long time. Steve Wolfbrand says, I made a nice little bundle investing in bricks in the early 2000s. $250,000. $250,000's pretty good. Was that $250,000 bricks or $250,000? I think $2 million, right?
But yeah, Matt and I would sit up all night just sending, like when we could not sleep at all, like we would send each other MMT stuff to keep us entertained.
Oh yeah, to keep you up at
night. And now look at Matt and I. We're now in a live stream together, having more fun than we thought.
There you go.
And so, was it Steve Day? No, Steve Wolfbrand says, I think China wants peace. Yeah, we think China wants peace too.
Yeah,
Because,
they're the peaceful panda in the world, of
yeah,
course.
because they're making a fortune being the peaceful panda in the world.
And here we are losing out on everything because we're ran by assholes.
Yeah. Oh, God. They
Yeah,
off.
and just the other day, some idiot with the White House and Antony Blinken, like I saw this on Jimmy Dore, and they said that the Chinese peace plan would violate UN laws, and I looked up what the hell they were talking about, and I did not see where a peace plan would violate international law, for crying out loud. And I was like, are these people these people like Antony Blinken and this other idiot are sick in the head?
Yeah, you're talking about Jake Sullivan?
Oh yeah, that prick.
That idiot, right?
Yeah, that
And
prick.
of course, there's Victoria Nuland.
Oh yeah, I can't stand her either.
I can't stand her.
She said back in like 2014, like during the Ukraine coup, F the EU and all that other stuff.
Yeah, she was managing the coup.
Yeah, and using Ukro Nazis as well.
Yeah. So go start.
Every time I see somebody, I'm just gonna go ahead and flat out say it. Anytime I see somebody with that flag in their profile picture on Facebook or Twitter, see it in their bios, automatically think that they are a Nazi sympathizer.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Well, there's good reason to think so, but there
Yeah,
might
there is.
be more reason to think that they're just idiots.
Yep.
Ghost that says a Green New Deal would be bastardized by the corporations.
Yeah, it would be watered down like everything else, like healthcare, like
Yeah, well, that's
the
our
AC.
problem. That's why we need to take over the political system by completely replacing all the congressional incumbents. I
It's
mean,
the only way we're going to be allowed at the table anyway at this point.
yeah, that's right. Ghost that says the rich will just buy carbon credits.
Oh yeah, the carbon taxes, all that kind of stuff. That's kicking the can down the road. That actually doesn't do anything. There's too much money out there to bother with. They'll just
Okay, and
They
Rob,
have a carbon tax up in Canada. They literally are forced to pay a carbon tax in Canada when they are monetarily sovereign and they can easily solve the climate crisis by creating more money into existence
yes,
instead of
the ideology.
Yeah.
instead of fooling around with a carbon tax.
Yeah, that's the ideology that everything can be financialized.
Yes. So Robert Copeland
Like,
said,
I used to believe in the carbon tax until
Oh, I did too.
I used to believe in the carbon tax until I stumbled upon real progressives back in like late 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't know any better. I was like, well, if we do a carbon tax, we can afford to pay for this stuff and that other stuff. And then I stumbled upon real progressives, and I don't get me wrong, yeah, we all met through them, so we can't say they're too bad.
I don't have any opinion whatsoever at this point.
But yeah, I was like, I thought at first when I started seeing taxes don't fund federal spending, I thought that people like Joe Firestone, Steve Grumbine, and all of them were out of their fucking mind. I was like, there is no way this is real. Like, you can't be serious. Like, I was extremely skeptical. Ask Joe how skeptical I was of MMT at first.
you were skeptical.
Like, I was like, there is no fucking way taxes do not fund federal spending.
Okay, the reason why I was not skeptical, okay, of MMT when I first got involved at the end of 2009 was that in the middle of the 1990s, I read this book by he was a business professor. His name was Betker. His first name, okay, is Rick Bettger. Boettger. And he wrote a book where he advocated for deficit spending and for creating a currency. And so I was introduced to those ideas by him. He wasn't looking at it from an MMT point of view, of course, because MMT was just getting started at the time. And he didn't have any contacts with the MMT people at all. But he still arrived at a similar solution himself. The introduction to his book was done by Robert Eisner, who had been the president of the National Economics Association and who was in touch with the MMT people from very early on. In fact, some of the MMT people studied with Eisner.
Yeah, like Warren Mosler, Stephanie Kelton was like the early ones.
The early ones, but in particular, Matt Forstater was
Oh
close
man, I love Matt Forstater.
to Eisner. Okay, and Eisner was close to Bettger, but somehow Bettger and the MMTers never made any contact. But anyway, this book, okay, by Bettger was a very good book. And by the time I ran into the MMTers at the end of 2009, I was really ready for them because of the Bettger book, okay, that I had read. So that's just sort of a footnote to stuff. So Robert Copeland asks, how much hemp would you need?
Good question. Well,
Remember
we could
that-
take and replace crops like cotton, soybeans, because you could take
Hemp is
cotton,
also a fallow
replace that
crop.
and use fiber.
Hemp is
make
called
the
a
same.
fallow crop. You can put it on every piece of land that you need to lay fallow for a little while in order to regrow the soil. It's a great soil rejuvenator.
And it would also replace soybeans.
Yes, and you can also do, I understand, 3 crops a year.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
on the same. So it's tremendously productive.
Yep.
And it's very good at sequestering carbon, okay, in the soil.
And
Which is, of course, one thing we really
I was
want.
watching a video, and it would take, okay, since I work in agriculture, it would take a specialty header for your combine that's like a 2-tiered header. You'd have one up top that would be cutting the seed and putting it into your grain tank on your combine. Then you'll have another header, which is like a forage harvesting header, and it would be leaving behind a windrow of the fiber, which you can go behind even that with a tractor and bale up all of that. So you can literally, the farmers could sell the hemp seed and the fiber, and it would be a very profitable crop for farmers because they're not only selling the seed, they're selling the fiber as well.
Oh, wow.
Well, hemp hearts are great
Could be
protein.
used in like hempcrete. It could be used in clothing, building, like all sorts of stuff.
Plastic can do all kinds of plastic. Hempcrete, and talk about hempcrete, and the hemp hearts are an incredible source of protein.
Yes.
Oh yeah, you can even eat.
In
You
fact,
it would even.
I've eaten some hemp hearts. They are incredible
No.
source of protein.
And you can also take some of the fiber and make it into a biomass pellet to heat your home with.
Oh yeah.
You can have
And
like
paper.
a biomass pellet made from the fiber. Like there used to be a biomass pellet mill right up above my house, about 3 or 4 miles, and they used to make biomass pellets there out of the sawdust from sawmills, and used to export it to countries like Turkey, India to use in power plants. And it was a biomass power plant. So there's been that source of green energy being exported out of the U.S. in terms of biomass heating.
Yes. So Ghost Art says there are 4 new U.S. bases in the Philippines.
There are. Subic Bay is one of them, which is in Olongapo, which is just northwest of Manila. I don't know about where the other 4 are. I think there's one in Mindanao. I don't know where the other 2 would be located. I know one of them in particular is in Mindanao, not far from Davao City. Like, I'm very big into the Philippine political scene
Oh, I know you
as
are.
of the last year. Like, I'm shifting more of my focus to the global south, in particular to the Philippines.
Yeah.
Like, a
So
lot of my focus has been focused more on uh, that area of the world. And that's where I want to take, like, maybe at the end of the year and take my activism there to fighting for migrant workers' rights.
I think that's a very brave thing to do. So Ghost Art says hemp can do everything petroleum does better and then some. Uh, I think that's a popular sentiment. I've seen that before. But
What
then
fossil fuels can do, hemp can do better. Is what Ghost Art's sentiments are. And it would bring about a true economic boom for our rural communities, like across Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas, Florida, Tennessee. Like, every rural community can benefit from hemp. And you could take, in my small town, have the hemp oil processing center where they extract the hemp oil, and then you could take 1 or 2 cities over, small towns over, and have the refinery points where they're refining it into kerosene, where they're making all the fuels that we need. They can even make a natural gas from it as well.
when you use it in that way, though, does it emit carbon?
No, not at all.
It
They've
still
already
emits
tested it
carbon?
in Costa Rica, and they have, in their tests, they determined that it had extremely low traces, like maybe one, like 0.001% of what fossil fuels emit.
Oh,
So
that's amazing.
all, it's almost not traceable at all.
So Ghost Art says hemp removes radioactive substances from the ground and probably the air. Has anybody
It
else?
will. Yes, it will do that. Like, they can also take in Ukraine, where all of that, if they're wanting to reduce, let's talk about you back to Ukraine for a minute from an environmental standpoint, not from a war standpoint. If they're wanting to rejuvenate the soil after all of those bombs were set off and all that, they can plant hemp and it would rejuvenate the soil back to the way it was before the war even broke out.
Oh, that's amazing.
It would filter out all of the pollutants in the soil from the bombs and the shrapnel and all that.
Hmm.
And look at Chernobyl, for example, as well. It would really rejuvenate that, and it would decrease the half-life of the nuclear radiation in the area immensely, like more than what we think.
Hmm.
Like, it would help out areas around, like, within a 30-kilometer radius of Chernobyl site, and it would really make it where it would be more livable for human habitation. Like, in 10 years after planting hemp around an area like Chernobyl, for example,
The
within
radioactivity would be gone.
it would filter it out to where it is habitable for human life again. within a matter of a decade or two.
So Lonadell says, I would like a real comparison of the CO2 between gas and hemp, actual figures. Is there a source for that, Greg?
I would have to look back through that. And I'm sure Environmental Coffee House would also provide good resources on that. Like if you go to join the Environmental Coffee House group and just go to like the search bar and type in hemp, which is what I did for a few of my previous shows, and I'm going to do more shows on environmentalism here soon.
Okay, so I guess one short answer to that is we could probably ask Sandy Shellis.
Either her or Jennifer Hines.
Okay.
Which Jennifer's always on Sandy's show. And there's also Antonio. I don't know his last name. He's also on there as well. Like Sandy would be a really good resource for that.
Yeah, I think so too. So Lana
Yeah.
says, hi, Steve. I wasn't looking at the chat the whole time. And Lana says, hi, Steve. And Lana says, okay, thanks. A map would be so helpful. That was, I think, a reply to Matt. And says, you will pronounce it Wagner or none of the bugs for you. I'm
Here
sorry.
I am live right now with y'all, and I am watching live broadcasts from the Philippines.
Yeah, Lana says Wagner the maestro was a Hitler enthusiast, if memory serves. I was under the impression that Hitler was an enthusiast of Wagner the maestro.
Yes.
I'm not even sure that Wagner.
I don't think they lived at the same time, did they?
I don't think they lived through the same time, or if it was just a few years. But it was the other way around because Wagner was composing in like the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, and Hitler didn't really come around until the early 1920s. Lana said, someone called me a clown yesterday because I'm still fighting for Medicare for all. I roll. Well, I don't know what clown called you a clown, Lana, but I think you know we're all with you when it comes to Medicare for all. Ghostdot says the dog's Wagner tail. Well, Lana says lost the feed.
Okay.
Finland was a Nazi collaborator state, so it tracks. Finland has an 832-mile border with Russia. Yes, it does.
Wagner, by the way, died in 1883.
Okay, so
they weren't,
as we surmise, contemporaries. Yes.
Yep.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene called out Zaza. Called out Zaza. I'm not sure what that's about. That nonsense at zero hedge with an insolvent Fed was as hilarious as it was absurd. Same type of nonsense as the rating agencies having an opinion on the Fed government being downgraded. Yeah. Lana says, all you have to do is look at the paper dollars in your wallet and then read my pinned post on either Twitter or Facebook. Lana says, Steve Keen. Ghostdot says,
Yep.
Never listen to you, Lana Dell hates the clock. Lana says, Steve, delayed response, and leaves an icon, which I can't read in this interface. And
yeah, talking about Steve Keen, he's even been on tons of Macro and Cheese episodes.
Yes, he has.
Comes from a different point of view, but it's a really important one.
Yeah, I appreciate Steve Keen's point of view. Like, he puts it into a perspective that really makes you think a little more differently. And
he uses the system dynamics perspective.
Yep. Yeah, he uses and Minsky calculations, and it's ridiculously accurate, scarily at times. So
Yes.
definitely an incredible. Yeah, and he's sick of it. Oh my God, he's so sick of it. He's so sick of people ignoring plus, math.
Yeah.
He's just
One thing
really
and this is something I did not learn about with in the regards of MMT, and this is probably about 3 years ago, and it was foreign direct investment, and I had to pick Fadl Kaboob's brain on that, and he sent me a lot of really good resources from GIMS and the Global Institute of Sustainable Prosperity, like the Gower
Yep.
over in the UK.
Yep.
Like they've got really great resources. So does the Global Institute of Sustainable Prosperity. They have great MMT resources.
They do.
I've even
Yes,
been
they do.
looking into ordering that book that GIMS has put out.
Yeah, I haven't. I've looked at it. I won't say I haven't read. The one that I would recommend everybody is Stephanie Kelton's book, because it's really easy to follow. It gets you really
Deficit,
deep.
Yeah,
It gets you far deeper than you realize.
clearly written.
And there's
I
also,
honestly think that's
and for those that are watching, if you really want a good book on the job guarantee, there's also A Case for a Job Guarantee by Pavlina Charneva.
Yeah.
she's amazing.
If
I
I
think
were
that
president right now, she would be the labor secretary.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
Federal
might
Reserve chair would be Fadl Kaboob, and my Treasury secretary would be Stephanie Kelton.
yes, I agree with those appointments. Who did you say would be Fed chair?
Fadl Kaboob.
I might put Mosler in there just because he'd have a relationship already with a lot of those guys. I would put Fidel. I would put Fidel at in the presidential sector, not necessarily president, but in his council, in his direct counselor, the council, and like.
Oh yeah.
He might be head of the National Economics Council,
Yeah.
or perhaps the Council, okay, of Economic Advisors. Okay, and Randy Ray might be head of the National Economics Council.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. Definitely a good spot for him. That's
Now,
funny.
where do we leave Scott Fullweiler and Matthew Forstater?
Well, Scott Fullweiler would have to be the head of the CBO.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I could see that.
We can't
as the head of the CBO.
Yeah.
And maybe put Matt Forstater as the Senate budget chair or something with the Senate budget.
He might actually be a better Treasury choice than Kelton, to tell you the truth. Kelton is so good on policy and speaking to a wide variety of groups that I would want her out in front. Not that Matt's not great and a handsome dude. That's not what I'm saying. I just think that the pure policy deal with Treasury, I think, would be he would be very talented at
and we
dealing
could
with
take.
that. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know them personally, so.
In regards to healthcare, we could put Amber Grigo over that.
Oh yeah, she's great.
Amber Grigo would be great over that.
Yeah, I think that I would want president as Kelton. That's who I think would be the best president we could have right now. Would be President Kelton.
Well, today someone remarked on Facebook, why can't we have Jeffrey Sachs, as president?
Oh, yeah.
Who is Jeffrey Sachs?
I thought that was a very, very good suggestion. He is the director, the head of the Institute for what's it called, Sustainability Economics or something by Columbia University. But he has vast experience in dealing with policymakers. He's not an MMTer, but he's immensely strong on climate, and in addition, when it comes to foreign policy,
Oh, there would be another person I would bring in for healthcare as well,
non
besides Amber Grigo, and that would be Jeffrey Ginter.
Oh, okay. I think I bring in Laura Fielding, actually.
All of them.
Okay, Lana says we have evolved. RP was a good stepping stone, but we also need to keep learning outside of their realm.
That's true.
Dude,
Like what we do with our network that we have put together over the last year. We have put together a beautiful network. We have Joe Firestone of Empowering Democracy. We have D with Around the World with Brandy and D, and then there's me with Revolution Evolution.
right? And there's Brandy also.
Yeah, like
And Matt has become part of our network now.
Yeah, you never
Yeah,
know. Maybe I'll come up with something.
Oh, you'll come up with some good stuff, Matt. I know you will.
well, if you want to, you could join me at Revolution Evolution. I can give you a show slot.
I really want to be more artistic with it. I think that's something that's missing, is that extra because I think people like to mistake economics as numbers and not realize that there's a spiritual connection that is we're missing because of the way that we're dealing with our economics in this country. And I would like to try and figure out a way of connecting people back to that.
Oh, I think that's also
Non-religious. Sorry.
I think that's also a feature that also reminds me of Jeffrey Sachs.
Yeah, he does. He's a little more religious on his side, but yes.
I wasn't sure he was very religious, but
It's
there's certainly a spiritual aspect to his approach to sustainability.
yeah, there is.
Yes. So Ghostot said, I minored in economics, but always felt MMT was a moment of clarity. And Lana says, mainstream econ is dirty. The progressive MMT PhDs made a new category of humane pursuits. And Lana asked, can we use hemp to rejuvenate East Palestine, Ohio? What a good question.
Yeah, you can actually use hemp like to rejuvenate the soil in the farmland around there, and it would also rejuvenate a whole lot of other stuff. It would like filter out all that carbon from all of that from that where that train spill was at. Like it would really be helpful there. So yeah, hemp would help East communities like East Palestine and all these other, even back in 2005, there was a community over in South Carolina that also had a train derailment that had some kind of chemical on there. I think it was like some kind of chlorine deal. It was in Graniteville, South Carolina, about an hour and a half away from me, like around Aiken, up the Savannah River from me. And that community as well could also benefit from hemp as well. Like communities like Graniteville, South Carolina, East Palestine, Ohio. And where else could there be a train derailment at? And like the thing that pissed me off with that, for lack of better words, but was Pete Buttigieg coming out and saying there will be more train derailments. Why don't that rat fink looking joker go and do something with his job instead of twiddling his little thumbs on Twitter and doing absolutely nothing?
Yes.
Well, we forget that politicians aren't leaders.
Yes, but we desire politicians to do some leading. And I think we have to keep on desiring that. And maybe we need to start insisting on it. Because
Yeah, and that's where the corruption comes in.
we're not getting anything from them right now. They're not doing their job. and especially the part they're not doing is leading.
Gatekeepers.
Yeah, they're gatekeepers and they're followers, and they're crowd people. They always want to be with the crowd.
It's a big club and you ain't in it.
Yeah. So Lana says, I have Sandy's phone number, but we should have a show on this. Well, I think we're all connected to Sandy on Facebook. And, we can certainly do a Facebook call fairly easily. Lana says, Kathy Cowan Becker is also very environmentally inclined. Yes, that's true. I interviewed her a couple of years ago. Alana says, oops, my bad. Sorry, getting my timeline mixed up. Alana says, Fullweiler, banking expert. Yes, he is. Banking and currency expert and a modeler also. So that's why I think that he would be really good for head of CBO. Because he's a macro modeler and he's a very, very excellent one. Gorstad says, addresses to Lana Del Hayes the clock. Yes, definitely. But first, they need to evacuate East Palestine. And Lana says, Matt Forstatter is also a Black Studies expert. Yes, he is. And he's an environmental expert, too.
I think the person to put in charge of like reparations for the black community would be Derek Hamilton.
Oh yeah, I think so too.
Or Dr. Darity.
Put them Derek Hamilton and Sandy Darity together would do an excellent job in the realm of reparations.
They'd also do an excellent job as Secretary of Labor as well.
Yeah, put them working with Pavlina as like undersecretaries or something.
And so Lana says, Steve, yes, that mess should have already been declared a disaster area. And Ghostart says, how is that for a delayed response? Face green smiling. Lana says, with respect to Treasury or Attorney General, she points to Rowan Gray.
And that would be a good Attorney General.
Lisa Theobald needs to be part of the healthcare group. Yes, she does. She knows it very well. Lana says, Sherry Wise, antitrust expert.
Put her over the Federal Trade Commission.
And Ghostart says, I don't think they even called it an emergency so they could keep EPA.
Palestine. Yep.
Lana says the Ohio governor is a jerk. Yeah, Mike DeWine. DeWine should be locked up for the energy corruption alone, Ghostart says. And that, I think, is the last comment. Thank you, by the way, for the comment conversation. It was very, very good here tonight.
Yeah, the comments really keep the show lively.
And thank you very much for coming. I want to say tomorrow night will be a Dump the Corruption fundraising show where I'll go through 5 regular Democrats and see how they raise their funds and whether they can pass the litmus test. On Thursday, we're having the show about what the reaction of the American people will be to the end, of neoliberalism. And we had a very good introductory discussion of that 2 weeks ago, and a follow-up discussion that was pretty good last week. We were hoping that Matt could join us last week, but he wasn't able to do that. Will you be able to join us this Thursday?
I'm pretty sure, yep.
Oh, that'll be wonderful. If you could be.
Yeah, Matt and I can have more fun on the show together like tonight.
Okay, so are you going to come to the neoliberal show as well, Greg, on Thursday?
Oh hell yeah! I like debunking neoliberalism. That's my forte.
Okay, that's great. Okay, and Dee, will you be here for the neoliberal show as well?
I think she done cammed over on us.
Hello? Oh,
Hi.
did you say something? I was just talking to my daughter. I have a show coming on next. I'm going to be having kind of like a special report.
Oh, you're going to have a special
on the
report
attack.
coming on next?
What's going on?
Yes, the attacks at Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the
Oh
attack
Lord.
in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's terrible.
Yeah.
That's really
That's going to prompt a response from Jordan because the Al Aqsa Mosque is property of Jordan, from my understanding. We can
Yes,
cover
yes.
that right now. But the Al Aqsa Mosque and even our previous shows that you and I have discussed ourselves, that is property of Jordan, and that's going to prompt a potential response from Jordan, and it's going to be an immediate response from Jordan right there.
Oh, yes, I think so.
So they do not want to mess with the Al Aqsa Mosque at all.
Well, they've
They've
been
been messing
doing
with
so.
it continuously.
Yes.
Yeah, they have
I
been
hate to time
interfering
out,
with
but I got to get going. I apologize. But
Oh, that's fine,
I'll
Matt.
be out on
It's good
Thursday,
to see
and
you,
you guys
boy.
keep going. Take care, guys.
Okay, bye. And thanks for coming.
Oh no, very.
But back to what I was saying about the Al Aqsa Mosque and what just broke right here. Yeah, they're treading on thin ice now. They're going into they're literally jumping into the frying pan at this point.
Okay, so I think they are jumping into the frying pan, but they've been doing that, right along, and people don't move to stop them, or at least there hasn't been enough response. Uh, okay, I think we should end now so Dolores can get started.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're all welcome to join me. I'm just going to go through
I'm about to
Twitter.
go to bed anyway, so it's good talking to y'all, and I'll try to be here with you Thursday evening, Joe. But sometime within the next week, I'll have my computer back up and running and all that.
Well, that'll be great, Greg.
And when I get it back up and running, I'm going to be full steam ahead on going back full steam on my show.
Okay,
I know how you work, Greg.
we'll see you Thursday for the neoliberal show.
Talk soon. I'm going to bed, y'all.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. And I'm going to end now. I will try to join you in a few minutes, Dee.
Okay, thank you.
So you have a foil.
Thank you.